Welcome back to What a Hoot, all part of the Keepin It Rural network. My name is Rebecca, and I am so excited for this episode. I've been waiting a long time to gather my friends Jeff and Courtney here. I will let them both introduce themselves in a little while, but today we are here to target some of those areas that might be tough to talk about as ag teachers, and especially as students in agricultural education. So these two teachers have been on both sides of the ag ed spectrum. Jeff has been teaching for 34 years, and Courtney has been teaching for 2.5 years now. And so we're going to hear the different perspectives and how that really plays a role in what ag ed was and is today. With that being said, Jeff and Courtney, welcome. Thanks for being here. Jeff, you have the most experience here, so I'm going to hand it over to you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your career in ag ed?
I'm proud to be here as the token old guy, the retired guy that's supposed to have a lot of knowledge, the old owl. So 34 years in Seneca, Illinois. It's my hometown. I served in several leadership capacities, both state and national level, and I have thoroughly enjoyed my career as an agriculture educator. And I don't find myself, if I could go back, do anything else. Yeah, it's difficult at times, stressful at times. There's a lot of sleepless nights, but the reward after 34 years, that I can walk pretty proud that we had a pretty good program in Seneca, Illinois, and had something to do with it. So that sums it up.
Well, there you go. And Jeff, you are recently retired, right?
I retired last spring.
Well, congratulations. That's very exciting.
This is like a teacher never retires. On my retirement trip solo through the southern part of the United States. So I was glad to be able to take time out and talk to people across the United States.
There you go. This morning he was in a different state. Now he's in South Carolina. This man's moving. So watch out. Jeff's coming for you. Courtney, tell us about you.
I'm in my second year-ish of teaching. Came in a weird dynamic, came in January, which not a lot of teachers do. So that was a really big, interesting moment, adjusting to the students and adjusting to my own teaching style after being observed and having a mentor teacher. But it's been really fun, kind of learning the process. We are a 4-teacher department now. We just added middle school. So my 2 older teachers and mentor teachers basically have been great teaching partners. Ag ed, though, has always been something dear to my heart. So coming into teaching, we are constantly busy, just like you said. I've definitely this year have realized the sleepless nights from fall stock shows to now going straight into LDEs. But it has just been a whirlwind of emotions, and it's been great so far.
Yeah, and Courtney actually called me on the way here, and she's like, hey, we have a barn emergency. Can we postpone this thing like 15 minutes? And I was like, do you need to reschedule? Nope, I got this. That is so an ag teacher thing. I'll figure it out. Let's make it happen. I applaud both of you. Thank you for what you do and what you have done in the past too. Courtney, you recently entered ag ed. What is something that you thought education would be growing up in the FFA world, growing up in California specifically, that now that you're in Texas teaching, education is not what you thought it was?
It definitely is not. Something that, still somewhat young. I started high school in 2013 as a freshman. So not too long ago, but definitely long enough to realize that what happened back then is not what's going on now. Thankfully, admin are really good about supporting us. I do know some other teachers do have struggles, especially as a first-year teacher. One of the biggest things I was not expecting are some of our students. Where I'm at, you would first glance think it's a really rural community, but we're next to a bigger town and more urban town, literally 3 miles down the road. So we have a lot of urban students come into our school district because it's a phenomenal district, and seeing that go with one another is really interesting. Students are glued to their phone. That's every ag teacher, I feel like any teacher really deals with that. And that was something I was not expecting as much coming into teaching, is just how big of a disconnect we have. Not that much older than most of my kids, especially my seniors, but to see just the difference of it is crazy and like mind blowing.
Oh yeah, I can 100% agree with that. It's like they're addicted to them, and I can't say anything different because there's times where we look for them too, but big issue.
Oh yes.
Jeff, I'm sure you saw that as well.
We did, and we actually had a discussion with our officers and some of our leaders, and we did something about it for 2 years in a row, is that we created a program called Freeing Phone Addiction, and phone is spelled with an F. And FFA, anytime you put FFA as an acronym, it validates the program, the activity. And so what we did is they had to record their screen time for a particular week, and they got a week off, and then they had to go back again and do it again to see if they could reduce their screen time by 50%. And most of them couldn't do it, like 33%. Yeah. But we realized that some kids were on their phone for 14 or 15 hours a day, and it just blew them away. And I did it with the caveat that I would not tell their parents any of the result. I would give them the overall results, but I wouldn't tell any individual parent, hey, you better watch what the kid's doing. And as I'm holding a cell phone here for half an hour to talk to you, definitely people talk about what's changed in education is kids get education through their phone, through a screen, and they don't get it through me or all the other teachers in the school. I was the vehicle. I'm no longer that vehicle now. And so as part of, we'll talk about classroom management later, is managing that technology piece and just put it away. Because we as ag teachers especially have something extra to offer them besides a YouTube video.
Absolutely. Yep. Kids get so hung on videos and TikTok content and these short reels and everything, but there is so much more to it. So if you can get them past the point of connecting to that video, I think there's a lot of options. So
Right.
You saw the rise of cell phones and technology and all the things, but that wasn't the only thing that changed in norms. Back when you started 34 years ago, I'm guessing that it was heavily male instructors in ag ed positions.
There was 5 females teachers when I started. I can name it for you. Right now, it's 55% female in Illinois.
Do you think there's anything in particular that made that change?
I've thought about that, and I really don't know. And I think it was just that somebody broke a glass ceiling and said, well, of course girls can do this. Of course females can do this. And I can't remember what the statistic was of how many females in our country actually manage and operate a farm, but it was amazing to me that they really did.
Yeah.
We got rid of that stereotype of the old grouchy ag teacher guy who his only job was to paint tractors and pull calves. And there's a whole bunch more to agriculture. And I think that kind of went into it. As we changed our curriculum, we went into horticulture course, more leadership, more communication, and things that were traditionally more female. Can't really put my finger on a number or a reason why that is.
Yeah, it's such a dynamic career, and I feel like it's changed so much in those 30 years that it is hard to peg, but those are really good ideas. I like that. What else were norms 30 years ago when you started teaching besides a heavily male populated profession?
1988 was, I consider, the change over from vocational agriculture to agriculture education when they switched those words. And it was strictly farmers at the time I had. I probably had 90% farm boys. Now I had, when I retired, only about 10% actually lived and worked on a working farm. In my area, and it's probably not down in Texas where she's from, but the livestock has really dwindled in my area. There's no more large farms that have kids that have show animals. But as far as big production, we have no dairy left. I think that's pretty much across the country. The small dairies are gone.
Yeah.
We had to change our teaching a little bit about that as well. To me, it mostly goes back to the technology part of what it did to our human brain, that we required stimulus all the time through technology. And I find myself just as guilty today. If you think back, go to back 1992, I was in there for 3 years teaching, probably the equivalent of what Courtney is today. How many stimulus do we get from text messages, Facebook, Instagram, or whatever other you're using now? Hundreds, thousands a day. We didn't have that back then. We could concentrate on lesson plans or talking with kids. And I think there was less burnout. I know it's an issue right now, is that our brains are just fried from all the stimulus.
Yeah.
And so I think that's been a big change.
Yeah. And trying to build that stimulus for kids, like trying to meet those demands. Yeah.
Oh, yes. The instant gratification is something that, I mean, like, I'm guilty of it, and it's so hard to preach that like it's a bad thing or it's a difficult thing when you're also guilty of it. But it's no longer teaching them how to find a lesson, I feel, or find an answer. It's teaching them, okay, great, you found it. Now what are we going to do with it?
Yeah.
Is definitely something that I feel is we're dwindling away and making it a little bit more difficult to get that through their heads.
You use the right words there, instant gratification. I always tell the kids back when I was a kid, and you met somebody that you liked at FFA camp, you had to write her a letter.
Yes.
Now it's 2 seconds later. If she liked you, she'd send you a text back. So
yeah. Why hasn't he answered yet?
Yeah.
Yeah. We hear that all the time.
Let me check Snap Maps. Let's just make sure they pay attention.
Let's check their location. Oh, goodness. Yeah. I am so glad that I did not, and I'm still young, but I am glad that I did not grow up in an era where everyone knew my location at all times. I have a boy that comes in and he says, well, my sister's not here yet, but she's going 86 miles an hour down this road. I'm like, why are you able to check that? That just blows my mind.
We can use it for good things, or it can bring things down.
It's all about how you use it. Yeah. In a very similar fashion, classroom management is all about how you use it. And I had this conversation with my principal so many times the first couple of years about the growth in classroom management abilities and the ways other teachers tend to struggle with it, and how he's never seen an ag teacher struggle that much with classroom management. And there's a few reasons for that. So I want to start with, when we look at different perspectives from new ag teacher to very experienced ag teacher, What does good management in a classroom look like in your eyes?
To me, classroom management started before you were in the classroom. And you get to know every kid on a personal basis when they're in seventh grade. After you teach long enough in the school system, those kids coming up, you're at the ball games, you go to their ball games, you were an umpire in their games, you saw them at the 4-H fair, and they knew you, and they knew you knew their grandparents, and I just never had those kind of issues. I didn't say I didn't have any issues, but it provided a great climate, a great environment for them to come into. They knew I respected them, and they knew what the FFA and what the Ag Education Program was going to provide them, that they wanted to be there. And goofing off and destroying things wasn't part of who they were by that point. I always told my kids that I don't know how to submit anymore a discipline form. Don't make me learn how to do that, because that's going to make me mad.
For real.
I started out with a list. It was called 25 Ways to Irritate Your Ag Teachers. So they knew what buttons to push if they wanted to irritate us. And my teaching partner, who I taught with for 33 years, we had the same list and we did the same thing. We did it for every semester, and we never really had any problems.
It's fantastic.
I think the classroom has to be organized. I'm talking organized as things have a place, and it's a warm environment for them to come in. They know where things go. You don't have to hunt for things. We always had a saying, it's called pibwib. Put it back where it belongs. Pibwib. It's the only word I ever made up. And so the kids get buy into that, and we have that. Things can be found. So
I'm writing that down to use it myself.
I know. I think that's probably the biggest thing. So coming in January, as much as they knew their system and trying to create my own system, but also understanding what the last 6 months of that last semester was very difficult. Just because, like you said, you need to know where everything is. Well, my mind was, well, I'm gonna know where everything is, but 6 months ago they didn't, and they had their own idea. So I definitely can see that, especially being in a brand new town, not knowing anyone. Where I graduated from, I moved an hour and a half away. But this year, making that connection, definitely going to the games. Not only the kids are excited for you to be there, but also definitely the parents recognize your presence. And as a first year teacher, I think that's something that we forget. I definitely had the mentality like, oh, I'm going to come in, they're going to know that I'm the ag teacher, and we're good to go. That was not the realization whatsoever. And I was like, oh, I have to reintroduce myself to people and make sure that they know, yes, I have 2 phenomenal teaching partners, but I'm also here as well. So I think with classroom management, that hits it right. My classroom management, though, from 6 months coming in to now has definitely transitioned. The biggest struggle, I think, personally, as a first year teacher, I had was being as close to their age, mainly with my seniors, and having that transition of a new teacher. Because they get used to what they used to have, and you're always being compared. So that was definitely something I battled more this year than last year with my seniors, because now it's been that full year at least getting started. But most of my students, my freshmen, we have our days. This is a different breed of freshman. I don't know if that's normal across the board.
That is across the United States,
okay.
Courtney.
Yes, I'm saying even just from last year, like a different way of freshmen this year. We like to be loud, and that's something I had to realize. Not saying I like a quiet classroom, because no ag class should really be quiet, I feel. But we like to use our voices. And so finding a way for them to use their voices and to feel heard without, of course, having like the AP run down the hall and wonder why we're screaming was definitely an adjustment coming in.
That's so true, though. And that's one of many ways to earn respect from your students and to gain that management of your classroom and that ownership. But it's a mutual respect thing. So are there any things that you've learned that, hey, this is one good thing that has earned respect for me from my students? Because it really is. It's a mutual relationship.
Yeah, I think definitely letting them know that each day is a new day. Especially being, I teach a decent amount of freshmen. When we have a bad day, it's okay to have a bad day, but tomorrow you're on a new level. We're starting fresh. And that's one thing I personally think has helped with them, especially just because they're like, oh, well, this teacher might hold a grudge and might now label me. And it's like, you're not necessarily a bad kid. We have some rough days. And I think that's where the respect comes, at least in our room, for that.
I had a basketball coach. My basketball coach for me one time, was PE teacher too. He says, don't yell at kids every day. You can't just do that every day. Once every 6 months, throw some against the wall, break something, and they know you're there. And I left that part out, but I always thought about that, is that just constantly yelling and manage the classroom that way doesn't ever fix anything. It's talking to them one-on-one, pull them aside, say, hey, I gotta have, you're better than this. I know you're having a bad day, but come on, go get a drink, come back and fix it. Okay. And I think that's, instead of just that constant antagonistic thing that goes on in the classroom with some teachers that just can never let it go.
That's not good for anyone. My grandpa was a math teacher, and my mom, who this would be her father-in-law, who she did not know was her father-in-law at the time, had him as a math teacher. And whenever kids would talk or be naughty, he would throw this rubber hammer at them. And that was his like, hey, you stop. And so my mom got the rubber hammer many times in this class. And turns out it's his future daughter-in-law. And so not only does my mom have this huge respect for this man, but we also have this funny story. And I look back and I'm like, Gramps, that really wasn't the best way to handle that. But that rubber hammer came out as his retirement party. Well, we've talked about classroom management a little bit, and it really makes me think about how much we have on our plates as teachers. Both of you talked about how being at games and being involved in the community is such a staple in being that teacher that is respected and looked up to. But there's so many responsibilities with being an ag teacher. If I was an English teacher, and I will say this, and I don't care if my English co-partners hear this or any of my other co-partners hear this, I think that my life would be so much easier if I taught any other subject. I'd go home at the end of the day and I'd be like, oh, there's nothing else. Like I have a textbook. We're good to go. I'm going to teach some stuff tomorrow and we're going to go home again. But that's not how it is for our profession, right?
Right.
So how have you learned to juggle that list of responsibilities from FFA to SAEs to AGET?
I'm going to be completely honest, not 100% well yet.
And that's okay. Yeah.
Not that good yet. Definitely, I think what my brain says the answer should be is I should know when to turn my phone off. Not realistic in my life. I haven't learned to juggle that yet. It is something that is a little difficult. Thankfully, it is great having a support system, especially though you are far away from like family or loved ones, just because first year job, you take wherever you can get it. It sometimes involves some moving, but having that support system has really helped juggle. Having someone to be like, hey, I think you're doing a little much. You might need to calm down has been the biggest thing. And then trying to know when to turn it off and have that moment. But I will say that is definitely not my expertise because we're still struggling. I heard that you don't really find a system till about year 3. So we'll see what happens next year, but
can verify it takes that long.
I always said it took year 4. Once your first freshman graduate, you understand the impact that you made on those kids. You got them to a different level, a different point, and then you feel good about teaching. Not that you just did a good lesson, but you did something for them. So
yeah,
I guess the best thing I did as far as for my teaching sanity and to make my life bearable was I married the math teacher. So I got to eat lunch with her every day, and I didn't have to worry about social life afterwards because I got to see her every day.
So smart.
Yeah, best things I did. But I think there's a lot of people that can take things off our plate. We always talk about the FA alumni and the booster clubs and to rely on them. I think we as ag teachers, we have such pride in what we do is that we're afraid to let go. And that's something you just got to give to some people. Hey, can you take care of this fundraiser for me? I can't do it. I've got to take care of this CDE team or even a CD. Can you coach these people for me until I get my feet on the ground? As a young teacher, I can't stress enough, get those people involved. Mm-hmm. I always found a way to find some money to hire an administrative assistant for the ag department. And I always tried to make it a former student who was in junior college. They knew where we picked up supplies. They knew what lesson was coming up and what supplies we needed, what applications needed to be proofread, all those things that just take hours and hours. I get somebody for 20 hours a week to help us out with that.
Jeff, was that something that your school paid for, or was that an alumni supported position?
It was a grant that I got originally. It was a grant, and then the grant ran out, and the school was so impressed by it, they just kept it going.
Such a smart idea.
Yeah. If you think of any other profession, like a true professional, a lawyer, an accountant, a doctor, they have assistants. They're the experts and they have other people doing things. Not that they're above doing them, but they were hired to do a specific skill. And it's not licking stamps on envelopes. Involve other people and get other people involved in what you do.
So smart, so wise. I need to take that and run with it. It's so hard to let go of those things.
I think something that Jeff touched on too is he married the math teacher. I think something we forget is my boyfriend and I, we hardly see each other, but realizing that your spouse can go to events at times. Obviously, there's a time and a place for something, but especially younger teachers in the dating, not married yet life, realizing that it takes a lot from your spouse as well to help understand really what your career is. We didn't see each other for 2 weeks, and he spent the whole day that he had off going to a stock show with me. He was just as involved as I was. And I know most people won't want to do that or willing to do that. But definitely, again, just going back to that support system and knowing the person that you're with or that's willing to help is a huge way of helping relief just some of the stress and just one more thing that you have to do.
Yeah. Filling both of those buckets at once of, hey, we're spending time together, but also I'm fulfilling this contract of what I need to do.
Yeah.
That's huge. On that note, I was going to save this one for burnout, but I think this is the appropriate time to ask it. How do you not marry your career? How do you not marry your job here at school and in FFA?
I'm not the guy to ask, but I was in such a good situation. I lived on the family farm. My wife worked at school. My boys went to that school. But my advice to other people is when you get, and when I speak of relationship, is you have those parameters set ahead of time. You have that conversation. A lot of times that if somebody falls in love with an ag teacher, there's a reason why. It's because they're hardworking, they're dedicated, they're talented, but you have to let that person fly. But at the same time, the ag teacher has to consider the thoughts of the other person. Say, okay, no Sunday night work. Okay,
Yeah.
one weekend a month, 2 weekends a month. I'm not going to be at school. And as long as you have those parameters set ahead of time, it makes the relationship a little bit better, I think.
Absolutely.
I think too, that's something definitely like I feel not married completely into work yet, but especially being on our own and not being so close to family, you do dive into everything. And again, my teaching partner, she's been married and has been teaching for 12 years. Yesterday I was here till 6 o'clock after chapter conducting practice. And she's like, it's 6 o'clock, you need to go home. So realizing that, and as a first year teacher, definitely saying it's okay to go home. We have a great system, and that's something one of my friends who recently started teaching as well, they don't have set jobs. Not saying that an ag teacher has to be like, stay in your lane, but it is good, especially with teaching partners, to know that Monday I'm going to take this, Tuesday you're going to take that. And that's something, I'm not a conflict person. I really want to talk to people at times about that. But especially if you are in a multi-teacher department, is you need to communicate to help save everyone from that burnout.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that communication piece between you and your teacher partners, your student teachers, your officers. And we did a couple things. One was I put out a weekly email to all the officers, all the ag ed staff. And so they knew what happened and what's going to happen the next week. And I took that off everybody's plate. I did the thinking part for it. But then every day in class, we did a thing called the Daily Digest. My new teachers changed it to the Daily Dirt. I'm not sure if I like the word dirt, but they did. What happened this day in history, what FA accomplished, ag ed accomplishments there were, not just they have FA accomplished, just something our students did. It was good. What's coming up, an ag thought for the day. And it goes back into classroom management, is there was a routine. They knew that was the first thing every day, and they were ready for it. Communicating daily and weekly really got rid of some of the stress of what's going on. I don't know what to do next. That kind of thing that goes on in your head.
Oh, yeah. I was doing that same thing last night on the couch. I was like, what do I do first? There's so much going on. How do I tackle? And it's one thing at a time. And it's so difficult to tell yourself that. But so when you are, and I totally think that I need to get this administrative assistant, because since I was in college, I told my sister I would pay her to read my emails and check my text messages. And she thought I was joking, and I am not. I will look into that, Jeff. My admin can blame you someday when we have to pay for it, but
Sure.
We'll figure it out. It is so easy, though, to prioritize one section of what we do. And we all know the 3-circle model. We have ag ed, we have FFA, and we have that real life experience SAE. How do we keep ourselves from not balancing and being in one area super heavy? I lean personally on the FFA side, and I have a really hard time not spending my time producing stuff for my CDE teams or working on finding coaches for things and really tuning into my classes. But how do we strive for better balance?
My philosophy always was that if it was a CD that we want to participate in, it was what we taught in class. I had success in the agronomy CD, but we taught soil science, we taught plant science, we taught production ag in that class. And when it came time for the CD, it was just what we learned. Same thing with horticulture. We spent a year getting ready for the horticulture CDE, but it was what we learned in class. And so it wasn't separate. Now, we did have some CDs that we did outside of classroom, but those main ones that's how you tie in the 2 circles of classroom and the FA together. A lot of things that we would do in class were community service, but we still taught things. And one of the projects I did, I get made fun of for this, but during COVID, we went and tailgated in the cemetery for lunch. And then we went and cleaned tombstones and researched the farmer who was buried there. And through that process, the kids had to figure out what legal description of the farm where they lived in, what machinery did they use, what animals would they have raised, and different things. And it ties into, hey, there's the leaders of our community. They also had to do a veteran at the same time. So tying in something into the curriculum that's also outside in the community.
So smart and so simple.
Yeah, I definitely think, like you said, you're already teaching it, make it worthwhile. Something that we're really big on is, like I said, we at first glance is a rural community, but we do have a lot of urban students. Having those school-based SAEs are huge. Our floral department does a phenomenal job we have a Bumblebee Blooms and making sure that those students are prepared and they have that floral aspect and that career aspect. Same with ag mech and then animal science. We're getting there, trying to figure out, I know the best way, but we're getting there other than traditional SAEs. I think too, like you said, the community service part, my seniors this year, we are doing a community service. Like it is mandatory for them to do in our advanced animal science class. It's ag related. They have to have a minimum of 20 hours. And the way to approach it is, one, it looks good for colleges because you can always have more. And two, you're getting back into your community and seeing everything that we've hopefully prepared you for outside of the classroom is coming up forward and making a difference. That's the best way. And to get those kids who can't have a traditional SAE, because I feel that's what lacks a little bit in some schools, just because it is hard. Stock shows are expensive, and that's the first thing everyone thinks of in ag is I'm just going to show an animal. We have one of our state officers, actually his SAE was breeding reptiles. Never would have thought of that. That was the most interesting thing. So I think it's really just finding that niche for that student.
One of the things I like to tell young teachers or those preparing to become a teacher is that you don't have to do everything. Not every CD is meant for everybody. I'm going to sound like a heathen, but I say this, but I never went to a livestock contest in 34 years.
That's impressive, honestly. How did you avoid it for that long?
There was usually something else on the same day. And then after 30 years, it was a matter of pride that I judge livestock as kid. I have nothing against it. I find the value in it. It was just something that it wasn't me. And I didn't teach it in my class. I've always went to the agronomy one, the horticulture, whatever. But you don't have to do all those. There's 16, 17 different LDs and CDs. That's a full-time job, just that, if you try to do them all, and you can't.
Oh yeah, that's something, can't harp that enough. When I came in, there was already 2 CD teams that the old ag teacher did. And so it's just expected that the new one was going to take it over. Thankfully, one of them was one I do enjoy. The other one, still, I think someone could hit my head with a book. I don't think I'd understand it. I am not a wool judger. I will gladly take the kids anywhere they want to go, but that is just something I just can't grasp. Wool judging.
Oh, this is a Texas thing, 100%, isn't it? Okay.
When they said the old teacher did wool judging, we already have a team. Good luck. I was like, what is wool judging? What do you do? Just look at it. Like, how does this happen? Yes. So that's one thing. Thankfully, the team was very nice and helped and we learned together. But that's the biggest thing is you don't have to do everything. And I think don't feel the pressure of what was done before.
I like that. Yeah. What about those single or 2-person departments where it might not be so easy to say no to trying to balance all of those things? If you're the only person in the department or you have a part-time advisor helping you out, how do you keep yourself from running overboard on coaching all 16 CDE teams?
I don't know the answer to that. I have the utmost respect for single teacher departments. I don't know how they did it. Like I said, I taught with the same guy for 33 years. And we didn't always get along, but we got along to get everything done. And he knew what he was doing. I knew what I was going to do. And it worked out very well. I don't know how somebody does it without that.
I walked into a 2, and then myself made 3, and now we have 4. I do have a friend though oh gosh, where is she at now? I believe she's in Nebraska. Allison, she is a single teacher department, took over after an ag teacher that was there for 30 plus 40 years. And just from the communication we've kept, she definitely seems tired, but she's just killing it with everything that she does.
And I think sometimes we forget to tell ourselves that it's okay to say no. If we can't do one more thing, or we like to say yes to everything and then realize too late that we're drowning. Just something to keep an eye on too. So in terms of juggling that, it's good to have those checks and balances like Courtney and Jeff have both said here.
I think it's important for young teachers to get involved in the professional organizations.
Yeah.
I know that's putting something else on your plate, but I think that was one of the keys of success that I might have had was that I got to know people from across the country, across my state, and I learned more about agriculture, but I also learned how they did things. You got the Teacher Turn to Key program, the Accelerate program, and all those talk about time management. They talk about how not to get burnt out and tricks to help you with your organization. And so get involved in those things. I know it's another thing on your plate, but in the end, it's worth it.
Oh yeah.
And there's no magic formula to doing any of those things. If we're being honest, there's not. And every shoe fits different, regardless of where you're at. But it's so nice to bounce ideas around with people.
And it's good to start it in college too. And that's how you and I met, and
Wow.
just stepping out there. It is one more thing, like you said, to add, but if you start in college, it's like a second nature, I feel.
Totally. You seek it after that then.
Oh yes.
Yeah, once you're in the classroom, you're like, oh crap, where are all my people? So our next section really does focus on that transition and all of the transitions in life, but it's about mental health. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about students, but we're also going to talk a little bit about staff and how it has changed so much working in a school system and how much you depend on your coworkers versus how much you're working alone and depending on yourself. So my first one is all about students. We are seeing such a skyrocketing number of students dealing with anxiety, depression, you name it, they've got it. And these students, we can't pretend that it didn't exist before, but it's certainly changed. So what has mental health looked like throughout your teaching experience, specifically to Jeff? You've seen it over 3 decades of teaching. I'm sure it's looked different, and maybe it hasn't, but what's changed?
It absolutely has. And I don't know if I have the right answer for it, but I'm going to go back to my answer before. And technology has made us so anxious. That instant gratification thing, if it doesn't happen, something's going to happen. So we got to go really fast. We got to get somewhere, and we just sped up as a society instead of using technology to slow us down. And we have all these emotions going on at one time. I don't know how many years ago, a few years ago, we've got a social worker in the school. We never had that when I first started teaching, and I can't really remember. If the kid was having a bad day, we go in the office, talk about it, and they were fine. And I don't know if we're taught to recognize it more now, but anxiety and depression definitely on the way up. And I don't have a good answer as to why.
Yeah. How would you say, and you've mentioned that you had a social worker at school, but how has support changed for these types of, and when students are going through these different transitions?
They have help available now, definitely. And I think now we've gone over the top of the hill of the stigma that mental health is something that you should be looked down on that person instead of now we're helping them. We understand, hey, there's something going on. We need to help them and get them back on the right track. Change in family life and in finances and the politics of the country now, all those anxieties add to it. We need to help those people and provide every services we can. We've got post all over school hotlines for suicide, depression, or whatever, and we have that support system in place. I'm assuming every school does, just like Seneca High School does.
And you hope so at this point, because those societal takes on those issues are so real.
I would say with that, one thing our officer team did at our retreat in the summer, they talked about mentoring our younger members. So getting a freshman or a few freshmen and a few 8th graders and just being their buddy for it. And I think that's something that definitely can help with not just the transition of them entering high school or 8th grade, but also letting them know that someone more than likely has gone through it with them. And like you said, definitely having that access to knowing it's something that's happening now. Our middle school teaching partner and I were going back and forth about how to not necessarily parent a student, but push a student. I think encouraging them and pushing them is not done the same way as when even I was in high school. My ag teacher would volunteer me to do something, and if I didn't do good, she's like, okay, you're gonna do it again. Like, that sucks to be, we're gonna try one more time. And there's just some kids you can't right now. And it could be a home thing, it could be what's going on, but knowing now how to read those students and when you can push and when it's okay to be like, all right, let's take a step back.
Yeah. And that is such a skill that I don't know that there's probably people that have it naturally, but it is definitely a skill that is hard to learn and read into. And it changes every day. There's days where you can push certain students, and there's days where, okay, you get the day.
And this isn't a secret to ag teachers, but we have a very special relationship with our kids that we get to travel 3, 4, 5 hours to a convention or a conference, and we spend 3 days there with them.
Yeah.
And we're surrogate parents at that time, and we get to know them and get to know their issues. And if we can't help them, we provide the help that we can. And it's something I found very special in my teaching career, was able to connect with those kids that didn't have somebody else.
Yeah.
One thing I did with when our 2 replacements came in to our department is I drove them around the school district for 2 days. And I drove them by houses that were very nice, great farms, top of the line. But then we went down some roads that, yeah, kids live in that house right there. Your kids live in that house, and you better get to know them. They're good people. To realize what they're coming into school with, and it's up to you to, after that first 4 years, make them better.
to realize what they're coming into school with is such a big thing. When we were going through college, I know some teachers harp on, you don't have a pencil, well, you're not doing lab today or something. That was probably the best advice is, yes, it might be a couple dollars out of your budget or out of your pocket. Just give the kid a pencil. Don't make that be the biggest issue. I mean, that stuck with me. And then my mentor teacher during student teaching always had a snack bucket. And it just was in the back. And that's something I try to implement. And I know it can get costly as a first year teacher, but you never know what that kid had that day.
Oh, yeah.
So just, again, making it feel at home, it gives that respect and just allows them to know that someone's there for them.
It takes one trip to National Convention and have pens and pencils for 5 years. So,
I need to put that on my list then. Tell my school district, if you never want me to buy pencils again, I need to go to National.
Between that and state fair, I feel like you can get everything you need to make those students survive. You're probably okay. That is probably the best piece of advice from the whole episode right there. Just National
Right.
Convention,
Yep.
all your
Right.
pencils. Boom. Let's stop it now. Oh my goodness. And so we talk about National Convention. It's one of the best times of year because we get to see all these people we teach alongside who get what we're going through. But in the halls we walk through every day, unless we have a strong group of ag teachers we teach with, coworkers can make or break an experience. And for teachers, that is so true. Jeff, you're lucky because you married one. And
Yeah.
Courtney, you have quite a few as your co-teachers that are ag teachers as well. But what role have co-teachers that are not within your profession or that you don't go home with at the end of the day have played in your own experience?
One of the things that is also satisfying for me as a teacher is that about a third of the teachers in the school I had as students. And so they still look up to me. I guess they looked up to me, or at least they looked down at me, the old guy, for advice. I think like Courtney, I'm so blessed to teach in Seneca High School in Seneca, Illinois. We're very progressive, and I never had a bad administrator. The school board's completely on board. The other teachers are enthusiastic, and you just get to know them all on a personal level. They're all different, but you get to know them on a personal level. I've always tried to help any coaches that I could. I volunteered for the Scholastic Bowl. My kids would make the play sets. You judge the cupcakes for the facts teacher. Eventually, you covered them all, and you got to be friends with all of them. And they knew they'd come to us and to the ag department, we get things done for them. But when we need something from them, something extra, it all worked out. And developing a relationship with your coworkers, and not just the teachers. Number one, probably the cooks that worked for me, the school secretary, the custodians, the maintenance guys, everybody. Get to know all of them personally.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was something they harp big in college is, like you said, not just your co-teachers, but definitely those who are behind the scenes and do so much for you. And until this past year, giving an extra FFA t-shirt, those really do help when you forget to put in a bus transportation request and you're like, hey, I need this last minute. Sorry about my plates being full, brought you a shirt.
I don't know what you're talking about. And also, a piece of advice I would give young teachers, I started doing this towards the end of my career, is that I put on a question on some quizzes like, what's the first name of the guy that cleans your room and cleans the bag? What's his name? And somebody does that? Yeah, there's a person that comes in and cleans up after you. His name is John.
And that is so much more important than knowing the growth stages of corn.
Maybe I shouldn't leave a mess in the bathroom. I shouldn't leave a mess in the shop because there's somebody that has to come in here and do this. Yeah. Put that question on your quiz sometime.
I love that.
I know.
Golly.
That'll be our bell ringer tomorrow. Do you know?
Do you know?
Yep. Tell me this. I think that definitely makes a good part. And I would say for being a young teacher, my first 6 months definitely stuck with my teaching partners, did not really adventure out. And I was like, this is my comfort zone. This is where I need to be. And then it finally, like the last month, just seeing them in the community, seeing just social media and seeing that we're involved. And I'm assuming it's similar because I also dealt with this when I was in high school back in California, not necessarily fighting with athletics, but sharing with athletics. So I think hitting it right on the nail of just making that connection with that coach, letting them be very transparent, know we're sharing students really does go a long way because, you never want a student to have to choose what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I always communicated with the coaches months ahead of time. They would know the state horticulture CDE is on this day, and they might not have a kid for baseball practice, but I'm telling you right now, I'm going to need him on this day. I'll get him back as soon as I can. And they were always so cooperative knowing that. And you never want to go into a coach after school and say, oh, by the way, Johnny's not going to be there for baseball practice tonight.
Yeah. I think once they realize that our year-round program, it needs to be planned 9 or 10 months in advance at the minimum. And so once they understand that we don't fly at the drop of a hat, we don't reschedule our games or our anything 24 hours later. I think that really does help with those situations.
Yeah. And they realize that things are beyond our control. We don't set
Yeah.
the date, state convention or national convention. It's
Mhm.
what we have to live with.
Yeah. The dates that are scheduled 5 years in advance. Oh, yeah. So let's move on to perhaps the buzzword of them all, burnout. This is a topic that I'm sure, Jeff, you have felt throughout the years. Courtney, you have been fearing in your first couple of years, because I sure did when I was in my first 2 years. I'm like, is this burnout? I don't know. How can I tell? There's no true way to truly define it, I feel. But we're heading into this weird world, I should say, where we no longer look at careers as this lifelong thing, right? My mom has been a secretary for 38 years and she's loved every minute of it and never thought about changing her job. And you think about those people that have done that forever. And Jeff, you were one of those people. You were an egg teacher for 34 years. And Courtney, who knows what the future holds for us? But they say that nonlinear career paths are the future. Why has that changed?
I don't know why it's changed. I had this conversation the other day with somebody talking about that you don't find a lawyer in the business for 30 some years. They in for 5. I think the statistic was that your generation will have 7 different careers in their time as a working adult. My generation was you find a career, you last as long as you can because there's going to be a pension out there at the end of it, your retirement system at the end of it, and that's success. So success is defined differently now as a career. As far as burnout, I only felt it a couple times, but one good thing about teaching is that there's always summer, there's always spring break, there's always Christmas break, there's Thanksgiving break, there's Columbus Day break. I used to think they were for kids.
No. When you start teaching, you're like, oh, I understand now.
Yep.
Yeah. And it goes back into personal time management and taking your priorities and leaving the rest aside. The first person you got to take care of is yourself.
Well, that was the truth.
Are you worried about burnout? You get
Oh,
burnt
yeah.
out as third, fourth year teacher?
That is something, especially just because, again, new town, not a whole lot of things to do, not a whole lot of people around. That's something not necessarily I feel like I felt already, but I was concerned about. Coming out from student teaching and going straight into teaching, it felt like it never ended. And then summer, I had this weird lapse and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to do something because I've never sat still before. So I got to do some stuff and I was like, oh my gosh, now I need to sit still. What am I going to do? So I do think that is a concern. Thankfully, haven't felt it yet, or at least recognized that I have. But that is something I think definitely is coming, hopefully not soon, but can always be in the back of your mind, especially too, you feel like you can conquer the world at 25 and you're like, wait, should I do that?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that our group of students was so heavily preached to about, if you're going to be in this profession for 3 or 4 years, you're going to feel it at year 4. And if you don't feel it then, you're going to feel it at year 7 or 8. And so it's over our heads, right? It's like just hanging over us. Like, when's it going to happen? It's this looming thing because it was such a big topic when we started college. But I would love to know, burnout is this big buzzword, but how do you actually define it? How do you recognize that, Jeff?
Like I said, I don't really felt like I ever had it, but I don't think there's ever a day that I was laying in bed in the morning going, I don't just want to go to school today. But I will tell if I need advice for young teachers, it does get better. You become organized, you get your routine down, you know what days that you're going to take off on that weekend or that 2-week summer break or summer break. These are my weeks. I'm not doing anything. Oh, there's a convention that day. I'm not going.
And hold your ground.
Yeah. And stick to it. One of the things I do is I play fast pitch softball. If there's a fast pitch softball tournament, I'm going. Okay. And so I hope everybody else has some kind of a hobby like that or some kind of passion out of teaching.
Yeah. So important to have a hobby.
Yeah. Rebecca, to talk on when you said this is no longer really a linear career for most of us, that is definitely something I think is, like you said, more common. I know a lot of students that I graduated with from my block or even years before, and I'm doing it myself, is we all go back and get our masters because we just feel like higher education, you need to do it. I'm working on mine, thinking it's going to help me in so many ways. There's pros and cons to it. Dabbled and thought like, oh, I'm going to be a professor. I'm going to teach for like 10 years and then I'm going to be a professor. And even just on year 2, I will say it's more difficult to think of not doing this career than going somewhere else. Hopefully year 5, 10, 11, I'll still have that thought. But I think there's such a big stigma on what are you going to do next? Like you said, keep this profession for a couple of years and then what? What are you going to do when you have kids? What is always your next goal?
Yeah.
I think that comes from people outside of our profession. that try to work up the ladder, the corporate ladder. We're at the top of the corporate ladder in our business. Hey, what better job can you have to be an ag teacher? You're at the top. You start there.
Yeah.
So,
But to the outside world, I don't know that it looks that way. For
right.
all 4 years of my college experience, my uncle would tell me every time I came home, you could be doing something more important with your life. My ag teachers even told me in high school, both of them told me, why are you doing this? You could be doing something better. When we look down on it like that, then yeah, it looks like we need to achieve something better. But I do think it starts when we're younger. I remember growing up in the 4-H system and in the FFA world, even getting internships in college. Everything was so sprint versus marathon, right? You had this gig where you won grand champion at your county fair, and that was a 1-year gig, but now we got to prep for next year and make sure we win the same thing or do better. It's always about improving. In college, it was, okay, I had this internship. Now I have to have a dynamite whatever next year. You go from being a state officer to, okay, well, I better get that national officer candidacy spot. And it never stops. So I think that we do it to ourselves sometimes too. As ag teachers, we promote this group of FFA that does this sometimes to ourselves. How can we help our students not get in the same rut that we're looking at?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
It took me a few years to realize that FFA wasn't always about winning. Yes, we're going to win. But if we get second place, that's pretty good.
Mhm.
Okay. And the only thing that would ever irritate me is if some kid had a bad attitude or sportsmanship was bad or whatever. But never, ever do we ever yell at kids because they got second place or third or fourth. It's not, it's the experience. And after a while, you realize it's the experience, it's the journey that does that. One of the things that people always ask me when I was getting towards the end of the career in year 34, are you counting the days yet? Are you counting down the days? And I'd always say, no, I'm making the days count. And the same thing I would suggest for younger teachers is that don't count the years left. Make the years count that you got going on. And you add up all those 34 times years. And at the end, you look back, that to me is having a successful life instead of having 7 jobs. So don't you guys get out of the profession.
Thank you, Jeff.
Sound like
We're done. Drop the
some
mic.
Drop the mic. Jeff's got it.
No, definitely. I think that's a big thing too. I will always pride myself. I was the best second placer my whole life. Stock shows, FFA, like I was really good at second place. Those first places sometimes, but that was one thing I humbled real quick and was like, oh, I'm the best. No, I'm a second placer. And we took one of our first ag sales teams last year, pretty much all freshmen, was so proud of them. We made it to state. We had such high hopes of top 10. We were like bottom 3. It was okay though. But at the end of the day, it was like you said, the experience. We made it there. They were green, and it was just a fun time getting to learn them and myself and really see who we were going to grow to be.
Is there anything that you tell yourselves when you have these high expectations, or you hear other people saying that you could be doing these other things, or are you counting down the days? What do you tell yourself and not just tell other people to truly believe that?
I think it's something that's just in us. We're intrinsically motivated people as ag teachers. Most of us are, I would say. And so it's not just something you say, it's something you live.
Something like coming from where I student taught at, it was big expectations. I felt phenomenal man who has been teaching forever. He retired, rehired, and is still there. He'll be there forever. And that was something really difficult, is I think the expectations of where I student taught were put on myself when I started teaching, and knowing that was your mentor teacher. And that was something I had to realize, is not saying it's okay to let people down, but it's sometimes to know where you're at in life. Just because you went through these experiences at one point, it's okay not to be at the same level as someone else. And as a first year teacher, that was something really difficult to tell myself, because they said glorious second placer, but I do like to win. I like the idea of we're almost there, and just realizing that it's okay, and it's okay to ask for help.
So true. So hard to do, but true.
Courtney, if it makes you feel any better, my department in 34 years was 40 times we were second place in a state CDE. 40. Like we maybe won, I don't know, 13, 14, 15, something like that. 40 times runner up. I'm over it. That doesn't bother me at all. The kids remember that. Man, we were state runner up. That's awesome. And you know what? You know, your own landscaping business. That's what
matters. Yeah. And we get so caught up in what we see every day, but it truly matters. What are they doing when they leave?
You talk about burnout, like, when did you know? And I always had this thing that I always told myself, if I didn't cry, no, not in front of everybody, but I didn't cry when I made the senior slideshow for the banquet, I knew it'd be time to quit, because I didn't care. That'd be a time I wouldn't care about those kids. And I always did. You gather those pictures, you put them all together, and like, oh man. And you look at the senior picture.
And those are little things that add up too. You see them all throughout the year, and then you have that personal measure. And for everyone, it could be different. It could be if you go to graduation and you don't feel that heart-wrenching moment of what am I going to do without these guys? Or maybe it's every morning when you go to school, you have that, oh, I'm so excited to start the day. Whatever it is, if you're not looking forward to that or having that personal measure, that's a really good idea. Well, we have hit 4 huge topics, and the last one is going to be a little more broad, a little less personal, but probably from the experiences that we've had, what we see for our organization as a whole. This is going to be ag ed and FFA based, but we talk about all industries having weak spots. The sports industry has tons of weak spots. The banking industry has weak spots. We talk about politics having all sorts of weak spots, but ag ed has to have some weak spots too. So where does ag ed come up short? Jeff can say whatever he wants now. He's done.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, you're done. You're terms. Hold on, I got a couple more years.
And this one's hard to think about.
I think for me, the stigma of ag ed still.
Mhm.
I just from going to different things, I think we do try to put on that glitz and glamour. And at the end of the day, like our job is to raise great individuals, to raise great people, and in a sense, some sort of agriculturist, rather than be them just being more knowledgeable about what we learned today or wanting to become the next farmer. And sometimes I feel as on the FFA side and the stock show side is we lose that. We think it's the glitz and glam and forget what the true start of this was.
Mhm.
How do we define ourselves and what our ultimate priority is? And I think along with that is the stigma of ag teachers, and it's okay to be busy. It's okay to immerse yourself in this, and it makes for a pretty good life. We need more quality professionals in our organization like you two. And also at the same time, how do we portray agriculture in our communities in a positive light? We've been not the future farmers of America for 35 years. And there are communities that still use it. That's great. That's what they teach. That's fantastic. But as a whole, it's not who we are.
Mhm.
But the style book for whatever national media, all the national media, all state media, still says Future Farmers of America. I can't get out of the articles in my local paper. So then you get the kid coming in for freshman registration, and I'm not a farmer. I'm not going to take that. What do you want to do when you grow up? I want to weld and I want to be a mechanic. Duh. I thought I used the word duh. It's probably 1980s, but
I still use it.
Oh yeah, the struggle we get every day. We have such a male-dominated freshman group, and it's why am I in principals? Why do I need to learn intro? Well, I want to be a welder. Okay, well that's ag. Let's take a minute and let's learn everything because who knows, you might need to go weld on your cattle farm when you're going to be an adult.
Mhm.
Like let's sit back.
you may want to know a little bit about safety before you get out there. You may want to know that you just don't run through all the welding rods in one day. Going back to my best answer is quality professionals that help get rid of the stigma of ag education that still exists for whatever reason. I don't understand why, and of the agriculture industry.
Yeah. And it's all about that transparency. Like that's the title of this topic, but you guys hit the nail on the head with that. It truly is the problem. It doesn't matter how many ag ed professionals we get out there. It's all about how transparent and truthful we are, that it is not Future Farmers of America. It is not the old pitchfork, I'm going to teach you how to farm ag ed system. But it is the number one battle I think a lot of us face. So on that note, then, where is ag ed making strides? So we talked about the weaknesses, but where are we doing some great things? Where are we having breakthroughs?
I think because of our professional development that's given by our state associations, our national associations, the regional conferences, we are keeping ag teachers up to date the best we can on technology, whether it be biotechnology, whether it be with drones and monitors and all that kind of stuff, is that we keep our teachers up to date so they know what's going on in all of our culture and every kind of industry.
I would definitely say getting them not necessarily college ready, but getting them life ready afterwards in the sense of something really big. And this might be big now in California, but I've realized in Texas is those certifications. Having students ready or getting welding certifications, floral certifications, livestock nutrition certifications, getting them ready for if you're not a traditional 4-year student or a college student, we're at least going to get you ready and see what the different trends are in the workforce now. So I think that is something that has shifted and done a really good job making sure that students are prepared.
Oh yeah, our students do come out ahead. I
Mhm.
always share the graduation rate statistic of how well concentrators and ag ed do. And I think that just blows the minds of some people.
And I think another thing that we've always hung our hat on and we continue to excel in it is all the soft skills that we can teach students, either in class with their SAE, with an LDE, of all the communication piece, the organization piece, the courtesy, the social abilities that we teach that you can't really put numbers to.
Yeah.
We just excel. There's no other program of any kind of education that does what we do for that.
So true. So true. Jeff, has there been any greatest breakthrough that you have seen in your 3 decades of teaching, or something that you're like, I'm proud to be a teacher in this profession because we overcame this?
I think we've done a lot, especially on the national level with Teach Ag, is that we just exploded the number of candidates that we have in college. Not that I think we can still get more through and become teachers, but I think that's one of the biggest things we did was the Teach Ag campaign. We started Teacher Turn to Key. We got the young ones involved. Then we did the Accelerate for the little older, 8 to 10 years. I think that's Accelerate. But I think the Teach Ag campaign, and I know both of you were part of that. I'm not just saying it because you were, has really brought that to the forefront and teach kids like it's okay to teach ag. In 1986 or 7, I don't remember what it was. I was getting my American FFA degree in Kansas City. And I was sitting next to my ag teacher, and he leaned over and he says, "Oh, I'm going to retire the year you graduate college, Jeff." It's all he said to me. That never occurred to me. And so I think about that moment still, 30 some years later, of wow, what we as ag teachers, we have to say that to every kid that we think that can take our spot.
Yeah.
And I think the Teach Ag campaign just took that and just went with it. Very proud of that.
So true. So true.
I would say definitely that, being products of it and seeing just the development they give to pre-service teachers to help you want to stay in it and see the result of it.
Well, and I think all 3 of us can talk about how gratifying it is to have a campaign that does promote that as well. And Courtney and I both worked at National Convention during that time when kids would come in and sign to be an ag teacher someday. And that promise and just the excitement that they had, I think that just fueled us for the rest of college and the challenges ahead of student teaching and being involved as an early career teacher.
And I never had this conversation with one of my students who is now an ag ed student at the University of Illinois. I never had that conversation. I wish I had, because that's my son. And he is now an ag ed student and becoming very involved and wants to teach ag someday. And so there's good hope out there for some good people.
That's so exciting. This has been so good. I would honestly say this is probably the favorite podcast that I have ever recorded, just because of the fulfillment and the positive energy. Like, you walk away from these things, and I hope that listeners can walk away too feeling ready and re-energized to go back into the profession. Like, I can do this. There is support out there. There's other people going through what I'm going through, and I get what they were saying. Thank you too for doing that. I have a couple final questions that are more fun than anything. The first one is, what is your ideal day as an ag teacher?
I'll let Courtney go first.
Yeah. Dang, I was hoping you would. Okay.
He's retired now, Courtney. He has his time.
That is true. Definitely wake up on time. That would be ideal day. And then from there, I do start every morning with a coffee. Do I make the coffee? Probably not. But get my coffee and seeing just students excited, lesson plans done the night before, but seeing students excited, ready for it. I try to give them an idea of probably what we're doing the next day. I'm really bad at keeping surprises because I just get excited. So they 9 times out of 10 know what's happening the next day, and seeing them excited to learn. Today was definitely one of those days. We did a CDE rotation, and I was just ecstatic. My freshmen were so excited to get their hands dirty and to touch wool and look at horse judging. And today was probably one of the wins of it, just because of everything that was going on.
Oh, congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah, even with the barn, it was great. Like, at the end of the day, it was good.
You said something there that the short term I use, did you win that day? And I think if you win more days than you lose in your success, my ideal day, I don't drink coffee, so I don't have to worry about that. As I swing by the land lab and the sun rises on the land lab and the grass is cut and the doors are locked and the lights are all off, and then go to school and have some kids waiting in my office for me just to talk, just what happened over the weekend or what's coming up. It's like most ag departments, there's a group of kids, the groupies, they come down and they hang out. And then going in and nailing the daily digest, nailing the presentation that day, and then doing whatever lab we're doing. Everything works in the shop. Lasagnas for lunch. End the day with ag business management class, and everybody's record books are caught up. AT is up to date to the last minute, and then leave after school and go win a horticulture contest. Come back home and sit and talk to my wife about the day and call it a day. How's that for a perfect day?
I love that.
Yep.
or second place in horticulture, either one.
Yeah, I was like, hold on.
Runner up is just fine. That's what we learned out of this.
Yep.
So that is the perfect day. However, there is no secret that teachers and their paycheck do not always equal the things we see on a daily basis. If you listen back to my episode with Sid Morris, he talked a lot about being in his own separate building and having to take care of plugged toilets and all sorts of icky things that normally are above a teacher's pay grade. But what is one thing that you guys do that is above your pay grade?
That one I don't think I have recognized yet, just because again, we have phenomenal admin. So if we do have that helicopter mom or maybe a little more difficult parent, they do step in. So that's one thing, yeah, I personally don't think, thankfully, have seen that yet. It would be great to have the secretary. That's just a bonus to have.
True.
Rebecca, what do you mean by above my pay grade?
Something that you didn't expect you'd be doing. So I always use this
Okay.
example for mine. I didn't expect to be a counselor. And that's what I feel like I do like 90% of the time, right? Is talk to kids and, okay, your boyfriend said this, but
I didn't expect to be a counselor, a social worker, the comforter when somebody breaks up with somebody else. I never expected to be a nurse and have to make those decisions. I never expected to clean the bathrooms. We have a land lab and we take care of it. I don't think anybody besides me clean the toilets.
that's great. Yeah. No, those are all great topics. And I think that there's a lot of things we do on a daily basis that we just expect as normal at this point. But when they happen, it was one of those, oh, they didn't train me in college for that. So AGAT is that in a nutshell. Every day is so different.
When they train us in college, it's one monogamous group that you teach instead of 20 different individuals that all have their individual problems and successes and needs. You're going 20 different places. They don't, it's something they don't teach in college. I remember college was a long time ago. But
I agree. College was a long time ago, Jeff. I agree. Well, you two have been an absolute blast. I hope that our listeners got as much out of this as I did. But even if you didn't, this has rocked my world. It has been great. I have learned so much. I've written some notes on here. One of them being that I need to get t-shirts for my groupies in the morning because I have never called them groupies, but that's totally what they are. Right. And other things like having that daily digest, not daily dirt, right?
I don't mind the dirt. We always call it soil, but daily, it works. Daily dirt.
Dirt versus soil. That is a very difficult, that's a touchy subject, but that's for another episode. But for now, Courtney and Jeff, thank you so much for being here. Is there a way that other ag teachers can connect with you?
I think one of the good things we haven't talked about our profession is asking retired teachers or older teachers, veteran teachers to help you. I've never been turned down by when I was younger as a teacher. Some others say, no, I'm not going to give you the material. I'm not going to help you with that. Always. So I guess best way to get a hold of me is jeffmeyerhofer@gmail.com. And I still have access to everything I ever produced, and whatever you need help with, you need advice, let me know. And just strongly encourage all the young teachers to stay with it. There's two things that don't happen anymore in my life is that there's no humans asking me to go to the bathroom anymore. And there's no bell ringing every 80 minutes telling me to do something different. That time will come and you'll feel really good about the career you had.
Love that.
And same thing too, try to be as much help as I can. You can always reach out, email. It's just CourtneyHerrera00@gmail. And I did recently start, mainly because one of my classes asked me to, an Instagram. So it's Herrera_in ag, like AG chun. So the action ag chun. So
what's this Instagram you speak of? I'm just kidding.
Being young, I still struggle with it. I am not on the trends. I posted something and I got told it was a little cringy. So I don't know the trends for the kids.
We'll get there someday, maybe. But maybe that tells you that you are old enough to teach them, Courtney. And that as a second-year teacher is a relief. Oh my goodness, great. So if you are wondering how to get a hold of Keepin It Rural as well, be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. I run none of these. Our fantastic producer, Loren, does. So I agree, I'm not the best at it. I'm probably cringy as well. But we so much appreciate being a part of the Keepin It Rural network and for the time that Courtney and Jeff have spent with us today. That's all for now, folks. Have a great time, and we'll see you next time on What a Hoot. It's not a party without you there. Follow Our Crazy on Facebook and Instagram, and be sure to check out all episodes and extras at keepinitruralgirls.com.
That's all, folks.